Editorial cartoons have long held those in power to account, knocking kings and dictators, if not literally, then at least figuratively, off their pedestals, and in most cases speaking up for the little guy and giving voice to the voiceless. At the same time, they remind us that no one person, institution or ideology is beyond reproach or ridicule. To talk to us about this, we're joined by cartoonist John Curtis, Brandon Reynolds, as well as Thulani Ntsongo, who is with the Citizen and Daily Maverick, and Brandon Reynolds is with the Business Day, and John Curtis is with the City Press. Good afternoon to you all, and thank you so much for your time this afternoon. A lot of people, when they see cartoons in the newspapers, they often wonder, what creative geniuses are really behind such work? Because if we are not in stitches, at the same time, we are really being made to see a moment in history or in the political landscape that we should really be paying attention to. I'll begin with you, John. Talk to us about what goes into your preparation when you are then choosing what you're going to be drawing.
Yeah, I work quite uniquely in the world, actually. Usually editorial cartoonists come up with concepts and draw their own concepts, but I've forged a partnership with Dr. Jack, and we've been going for 10 years this year, in which I conceptualize the cartoons and he draws them. He's brilliant at what he does. But from my side, I guess there's two parts to what I need to do. The first is to decide which story to focus on. And once I've decided that, that's quite often the hardest thing because there's so many stories that sort of flood the space. I then I have a sketchbook and I just scribble down ideas until something clicks. And I've managed to establish a good habit for finding the sort of angles that would work. And I collaborate with Dr. Jack and a couple of other cartoonists, including Thulani, who's with us today, for Citizen Maverick. We alternate between cartoonists, and I sort of conceptualize the ideas, send them a rough sketch, and we can do this all digitally these days, and they turn it into beautiful artwork.
I want to, when we continue with this conversation, talk about a cartoon that had me in stitches. The one you worked on recently on the interaction between the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo and the President at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. But let's move to Thulani rather for now, before we talk about that one, John, because that cartoon, I remember even in the newsroom, became the subject of a lot of jokes. But Thulani, for you, is it always about the big news story of the day? Or do you then look at some of the stories that we may not necessarily be focusing on in order for you to shine that spotlight on?
It's not always about the big stories. Like you said, because people may focus on that story a lot. So we try to also raise social consciousness, to people, so that it's not always about politics or who did that in politics and that. Sometimes we just try to raise social awareness, or maybe like I did one cartoon for the Citizen, and then most people didn't know about it. Like one of the police stations was robbed and guns and ammunition were stolen there. But then, so we try to highlight such issues. For us, there's no big or small issue to tackle.
And for you, Brandon, when it comes to the conceptualization process, it's one of those processes that is so critical because it's going to translate on what you put on paper, isn't it?
Bogewe, yes, indeed. That's, as John has said, that's kind of the hardest part of this job, is to come up with an idea that, or at least start focusing on a particular subject and then coming up with an idea. And that's critical. You have to be really sure about your idea before you can, spend 3-4 hours drawing it up. And it does take quite a bit of work. So a crucial part is the idea and what you're trying to communicate and how you're trying to say it. And it's all becomes a game against time.
So, Brandon, people often think that as journalists we have a lot of words all the time and we can write all the time, anytime, but there is something called a writer's block, and I assume that maybe you also do go through that at some point, especially in the process of drawing or putting together a concept. How do you move past this?
Fortunately for me, I have deadlines pretty much every day, so there's very little time for block.
It looks like Brandon's line there is letting us down. I'll take the question to you, John.
Actually, I'll complete what Brandon was about to say. There's a great Calvin and Hobbes cartoon in which the two protagonists are talking to one another, and Hobbes asks Calvin what inspiration he needs to make his homework deadline, and he says he needs a looming deadline. And that's true for all of us. The deadline sort of turns into panic, and that panic ideas seem to materialize out of panic quite efficiently.
It sounds like any other journalist in the newsroom, Brandon.
The deadline brings out the best in us.
Definitely, definitely. When you are told to do something for next Thursday, you wait until, if it's due at 12 o'clock, you wait until 10 o'clock to put that process together.
Yeah. Absolutely.
and for you, Thulani, let's then look at the importance of, through this work, not only as others see it as humor, but for you to really advocate for change in some of the areas where you choose to begin then to, draw your cartoons and try to shape either get the viewer, the reader thinking, or maybe get them passionate about something.
Yeah, it's really quite a challenge because what you do really influences others' way of thinking. Because sometimes you can make a cartoon, and then when you put it out there, you had a different concept as to how people will react to it. Like you had your own thinking that they will take it like that, they will get the message. But then now you'll get sometimes like a feedback and people calling the cartoon you did racist or biased or something. But then all cartoons, I don't know about my fellow cartoonists, are open to various ways of being scrutinized. You may have the concept, but then people take it the other way. But then if a cartoon sparks a debate, it's more good for us because then people will start talking and coming up with their own views on the cartoon.
And I want us to talk about that on the other side of this, because there have been others who are saying that you seem to be picking on the same victims all the time, if I can use the word victim, and others are saying some cartoons are, perceived to be racist. And I want them to get a sense from you on how you deal with that when people have taken offense to what you've decided to put on paper, and how do you deal with that. And John, I really want us to speak about this cartoon when we come back, because I really want to know the thought process for this one. Let's continue with this conversation in just a moment. Let's continue our conversation with cartoonists John Curtis, Brandon Reynolds, as well as Thulani Nzongo, who are talking to us about what goes into the preparation of what they decide then is going to be the concept that they are going to be putting out there to the readers. And let's then continue on this, front as we look at some of the work that you have, in fact, put out. Thulani, I see there's this cartoon where you are depicting the coronavirus, and if I can capture it correctly, because I'm not I'm a 2000 generation, so I'm going to try and read what you've written there, where you are saying, ayebo, and then I think this is the whole thing that people say when they are dancing, right? At all these parties. And then you've got the virus depicted as entering the nostrils. Talk to us about this cartoon. What message were you trying to put across?
Okay, I remember that cartoon. The message was basically simple, because I wanted to target these large gatherings and partying and clubs, because we're in the midst of the third wave and it's spreading like wildfire. So I just wanted to make it aware that, because it's mostly targeted at young people and the trends that go along with it. So the cell phone in the mouth and the COVID virus on top, because when they dance, they used to put the cell phone in the mouth and put beer on top. So instead of the beer, I put the coronavirus, or sometimes they put the beer on the head. So I put the coronavirus also on, just to highlight that this is serious, but in a way you can still laugh at it, but there's a seriousness behind it. So
and also just saying to them that as they are in these large gatherings, they must also be aware that there's a virus in their midst.
Exactly, yes.
John, one of the articles that drew some serious criticism for you was when you were talking about the president at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, and you are using a very interesting way of putting out his options that he was reading out to the Deputy Chief Justice on whether or not he needed to stay inside to fight the system, or should he have gone out not to fight the system. Talk to us about why you chose this approach.
Sure. I don't know if you've put the cartoon up on screen for the readers, for the viewers to see, but essentially it draws from an American president, I think it was Johnson, who first coined the term when he brought an enemy of his into his government, and people said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "I'd rather have him in the tent peeing in I'll use the word pee, than outside of the tent, in the tent peeing out, than him outside of the tent peeing in." So that's a political term that's become quite popular ever since he said it. And other cartoonists have used it before, and we just added a twist to it, where the president, and I should just say that many of my cartoons have been supportive of our president at the moment. I think he's the best man for the job, but I'm also getting frustrated with everybody that things are moving too slowly. When he was at the Zondo Commission, and he was saying that he stayed in the ANC and he didn't speak out while he was deputy president, that made me think of that saying that President Johnson had brought out. So we had him saying, I decided I was faced with two options, whether to stay in the tent in the ANC and pee out, or go out of the tent and pee in. If he'd spoken out, he might have been thrown out of the ANC, and then he could have made it more of a noise about state capture. And we have Judge Zondo saying to him, "So which did you choose?" And he said, "I stayed in the tent and peed in my pants." And that's obviously been a lot of people have responded to that in a very positive way, because I think it has tapped into the national feeling. But of course, apologists for this, the way the ANC turns a blind eye to a lot of things that have been going on, have also criticized it.
And Brandon, for you, you've taken a slightly different approach. I see that John says that, he's been very supportive, but he's getting frustrated. And one of the things that I see as an element of frustration for you, especially in this cartoon where you can see the president with his feet on the table, and he is seemingly in a bit of a relaxed position. Some of the things that you're putting there is for you not only the 9 wasted years, but also the 3.5 wasted years, as you put it, Talk to us about the thought process that went into this cartoon.
Yeah, it was just to highlight some of the things that came out of the State Capture Commission, where the president did 2 days of testimony. Was that there's certain people in specifically state security who were fingered in a lot of reports and testimony at this Honour Commission, and these particular people are still in government, maybe not in state security anymore, but are still in government. And the point was really that no action's been taken against people like that and many other people like that in government who've been able to stay in, even though they have been implicated in corruption and specifically in state capture during the Zuma years. And the president seems quite comfortable waiting until the final report is eventually released before he mentioned he would take any action. So that just kind of makes one wonder how long this is going to take before we see people being held to account for the things that have been done. But I guess the president wants to be careful that he only takes action against people who are found without a doubt guilty. But implicated people should be suspended and should face some kind of action anyway.
And interestingly enough, you also zoom into it when you look at the issue of the new Speaker of Parliament, something that a lot of people have really been talking about, and how she, according to some, has actually had a slap on the wrist, in fact, instead of being shown the door. And that is something that you're zooming in there when you are, really alluding to a parliament that is not as awake as it should be. And at the same time, you also then are suggesting almost like that he's whispering to the former defense minister that this is now your new role, despite you having been caught napping.
Correct, yeah. Quite a serious situation we've just been through, getting a new speaker elected in the National Assembly, who was then removed from her portfolio as a defense minister, because she was found wanting during the riots and looting of a few weeks ago, and then also contradicted the president in public, saying that she didn't think it was an insurrection and it was just some thuggery. She was then removed from that post, but instead of that being a sanction, she was then effectively promoted to being the Speaker of the National Assembly, which is a higher salary and some many more perks compared to a cabinet minister, and also gets to stand in as president if ever the president is impeached or is found or doesn't survive a vote of no confidence in Parliament. She automatically becomes president until overseeing the process of electing a new president. So she's been put in quite a powerful position, even though she was effectively supposed to have been given some kind of sanction for her performance, even though she's been defense minister since 2014. There is a lot to be said for that. So that was my commentary. And of course, a lot of people feel that people in Parliament just snooze all day and don't really do anything for us in the country. That she would be the perfect person to head that institution.
And Thulani, before I come to you on the Women's Day depiction, I'd like to bring you back into this conversation, John. One of the cartoons that I'd really like for you to, talk our viewers through the thought process was Zuma's next tea party. What was the thinking behind this one?
That is more of a fun wordplay, because the T, as you'll see in the cartoon, is spelled T-double-E. And it's the cartoon shows the picture of Jacob Zuma teeing off with Shabir Sheikh in the background, and Carl Niehaus carrying his golf bags for him. And the idea is that things are starting to look like Jacob Zuma's preparing for a medical parole, and he'll be on the golf course, at least figuratively speaking, before we know it. And so that's what that cartoon is about. And we did that one for Outer, who are always appreciative of cartoons that sort of address these kind of issues.
And Thulani, you know, a lot of people have spoken about Women's Day really not having much of a meaning to a lot of women, especially because it looks like it's still a day and not much has been done in terms of strides that have been made to ensure that they have equal opportunities as their male counterparts. And one looks at your cartoon here with a woman really with quite a large, you know, backpack, if I can put it that way. Talk to us about, you know, this cartoon and what concept went into it.
That cartoon specifically, I worked with John. So we were just trying to highlight that in South Africa we have so many days that we say we celebrate, and we have a Women's Month, but we believe that not enough is being done to try to resolve most of those issues that she's carrying on that bag. Because every day we still see gender-based violence, inequality at work. We see the mistreatment of women. But then we say we have a Women's Month, but we still believe that not enough is being done for that.
And for you,
we just put up.
For you, Thulani, how do you handle those who say that your work may be offensive sometimes?
Initially, it was you become too hard on yourself. You know, you can become like what you're doing is not good enough, or because if you what we do will basically offend a lot of people. So how I deal with it now is that you bring serious issues to the fore. You make sure that they are factual. Then when people don't like your work, you just roll with the punches, if I can put it like that. Because you can't please everyone, especially in this cartooning field.
And for you, John?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, cartoons are meant to, your typical editorial cartoon is meant to offend. It's meant to offend the people that you're targeting. And obviously their supporters will be offended. So, well, just like Thulani, earlier on in my career, I was very sensitive to criticisms, but then I learned to take the criticism from whence it comes. And quite often it comes from apologists for the people that you're trying to draw attention to. And it becomes quite obvious sometimes those people will cry out racism or will accuse the cartoon of being offensive in reasons that it isn't. It's not to say that as cartoonists we don't need to be very careful not to tread carefully and not to use racist tropes that have been used by cartoonists throughout the years. And I mean, you look back in the history of cartooning, and it's littered with very bad examples of terrible examples of racism and anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and sexism and everything. So one has to be very careful of that. But most cartoonists are progressive and would generally steer away from that. And if there is any instance where the cartoon could be perceived to be like that, quite often it depends on the perception of the reader, or there might be some accidental misinterpretation on the part of the cartoonist. But on the whole, cartoonists punch up. We try and fight against all those things. We fight against any form of prejudice that we can, and we fight against corruption, and we fight against the abuse of power. And people that criticize it are quite often people who want to defend those things.
All right. Thank you so much to you all for your time. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you. That was quite an insightful conversation. Now I know when I see the cartoon, I'll know at the back of my mind what concept you were probably gunning for, in order for the viewer to, and the readers, in fact, to be able to make a sense of the kind of messaging that you are putting out there. Thank you so much to you all for your time, and I look forward then to seeing more of your work in the coming week. That was John Curtis, cartoonist, City Press, and who works with Dr. Jack as well as Brandon Reynolds, a cartoonist for Business Day, Tulani Nsongo, who's a cartoonist for the Daily Maverick. And this is where I leave it for today. Valen Ketley is up next with your sport. From me and the rest of the team, goodbye.